Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. This is your home for organic Bible study that's responsibly handled and fresh and artisanally made. It's just for you. 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, studying the Psalms verse by verse. And today we're looking at Psalm 91, actually all this week. We'll do all 16 verses of Psalm 91 this week. This is one of those Psalms that has been beloved by the church ever since there was a church. This is a member of the ancient Christian hymnal, and people have loved this song for a very long time. We have it in musical form, actually recorded in musical form by many, many different artists over the centuries, just because this one is just it's so wonderful. It speaks to our need. It's a tender promise. There's so much about how the Lord cares for his people here in this psalm. We often retreat to Psalm 91 when we're in trouble, and we love to read it and imagine how the Lord is going to make this promise real in our life. This psalm comes without an introduction, so it's an orphanic psalm. We don't know who wrote it or what it's about or the background of it and all the things that introductions usually give us. Even the choir master is not mentioned. So we don't have anything about the origin of the song or who wrote it or any of that. So we'll call it an orphanic psalm. It's interesting, though, that it comes on the heels of the song that Moses wrote. Perhaps, maybe Moses is behind this one as well. Who knows? This could be David, could be Moses, could be Solomon, could be Asaph, could be any of them. So this psalm is divided into 3 different sections by voice. First, we have the psalmist, whoever it is, speaking in verses 1 and 2, and he's speaking about his faith. So it's all first person. He's extolling his faith to the Lord in the first 2 verses, and then he turns to the reader. And then he speaks to the reader in verses 3 through 13. So the majority of the psalm is about the reader. And I guess maybe that's why it engenders so much joy in us, is the psalmist is speaking to us. Centuries and centuries and centuries ago, he's still speaking to us and encouraging our faith in Christ. So we have his faith declared in verses 1 and 2, him encouraging our faith in verses 3 through 13, and then we have the Lord speaking in verses 14 through 16, giving us this tender promise that he makes on the heels of all of this wonderful confession that the psalmist makes about his faith and encourages in the reader. So 3 different, parts, 1 and 2, 3 through 13, which comprises the majority of the psalm, and then 14 through 16, which is probably the most important piece because the Lord is speaking to the reader himself. All right, let me jump into verses 1 and 2 today. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust. I believe that these 2 verses compose the keynote of the psalm, because everything really flows out of this declaration that the psalmist makes here of his faith. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High. So we know that he's speaking of he in general, he himself, and he the reader. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Here's the promise, and it's a promise that the Lord picks up on later in 14 through 16, and that the psalmist applies to the reader to encourage his or her faith in 3 through 13. So then he says in 2, I will say of the Lord. So now we're going to get the direct statement of the psalmist about his faith. He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust. I tell you, this sounds a whole lot like Psalm 18, doesn't it? David's great confession of faith. My refuge, my fortress, my God. All of those are themes that come straight out of Psalm 18. Psalm 18 really infects so many psalms because whether it is tacit or whether it is intentional, I think we have the influence of David on so many psalms, and it streams right out of Psalm 18. We have it here in verse 2, but of course this is whoever the psalmist is. This is his confession of faith. And if he adopts it after the form of David in Psalm 18, so be it. I mean, so do we, right? We would say the same thing. God is my rock and my fortress, my shelter, my high tower. We use that language because it's language that we've learned and loved, and once we're in Christ, we understand how precious that language is. So why not the psalmist uses it here in verse 2? All right, well, join me tomorrow. We're going to look at verses 3 through 7 here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.